ارگان‌های پدافند هوایی نیروی هوافضای سپاه.
Iran may soon face a full reimposition of United Nations sanctions unless it returns to nuclear talks. So why does this matter? What does the West want? And what's at stake for Iran and the world? Let's break it down. For years, Iran has insisted that its nuclear program is peaceful, aimed at energy production and medical use, not weapons. Tehran argues it has a right under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to enrich uranium for civilian needs. But the outside world does not see it that way. Western governments say the levels of uranium enrichment, coupled with Iran's lack of cooperation with International Atomic Energy Agency or IAEA inspectors, look like steps toward developing a nuclear weapon. So what would snapback look like in practice? If triggered, a snapback would reinstate the full range of UN sanctions. That means an arms embargo, missile restrictions, travel bans, asset freezes, and a ban on nuclear-related trade and technology. Economically, this would be devastating. Iran's oil exports, banking, shipping, and infrastructure projects would be hit hard. And remember, Iran's economy is already fragile. Inflation is above 40%, the currency is one of the weakest in the world, and poverty is widespread. Oil exports have collapsed since the US sanctions returned. Some $100 billion in Iranian assets abroad remain frozen. These are the funds Iran desperately wants access to. Sanctions would also worsen shortages of food, medicine, and essential imports, hitting ordinary Iranians hardest. The pressure now is intense. Unless Iran reopens negotiations and allows inspectors back in, the E3, that is Britain, France, and Germany, are ready to trigger the UN's snapback mechanism. What does that mean? This means all the sanctions lifted under the 2015 Iran nuclear deal would automatically return without a new UN vote, and most importantly, without Russia or China being able to veto. The timing is crucial. The snapback mechanism itself expires on October 18, 2025. So the Europeans are racing to act in September, while South Korea holds the rotating Security Council presidency. If they wait until October, Russia could try to stall the process. And this pressure comes on the heels of a dramatic escalation earlier this year. Tensions spiked in June this year when Israel and the United States launched coordinated strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Over 12 days of conflict, enrichment plants at Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan were hit. Reports say bunker buster bombs were used, crippling parts of Iran's enrichment infrastructure. Several of Iran's top nuclear scientists were also killed. In response, Iran halted cooperation with the IAEA, the international watchdog, arguing it could not guarantee safety for inspectors. Since then, the world has little idea about the status of Iran's stockpile, which was believed to include 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. However, UN nuclear inspectors returned to Iran earlier this week for the first time since it suspended cooperation with them in the wake of Israel's attacks on its nuclear sites. Let's listen in to what IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi said in his interview with Fox News Channel.
Now the first team of IAEA inspectors is back in Iran, and we are about to restart. Of course, when it comes to Iran, as you know, there are many facilities. Some were attacked, some were not. So we are discussing what kind of modalities, practical modalities, can be implemented in order to facilitate the restart of our work there. We've seen many successes in the past few weeks where, in spite of very difficult conditions, it has been possible to broker deals, to bring people together. This is a special case because, of course, Israel is also involved. There is a matter where the United States took action. So the reconstruction of this dialogue conversation is more difficult, but it's not impossible. It's not at all impossible. Of course, certain conditions must be met, and our work, the work of the inspectors, is indispensable because without us being there checking what is going on, you cannot enter any serious negotiation without knowing what is really happening in countries, especially if you want to avoid a repetition of what we saw in June.
The war hardened Iran's leadership. Hardliners gained ground, insisting that negotiations are pointless if their nuclear facilities can be bombed at will. diplomacy has become even more fragile since. So what exactly do the Europeans want? First, they argue Iran has broken its commitments by enriching uranium up to 60%, which is, they say, alarmingly close to weapons grade, and then by cutting off cooperation with international inspectors. Second, Europe says they want to protect the credibility of global non-proliferation rules. If Iran's enrichment is left unchecked, other countries may follow. Third, geopolitics. With the October deadline looming, Europe wants to act before Russia can delay proceedings. Even though Snapback technically avoids vetoes, procedural stalling remains a risk. But Iran sees things differently. Iranian officials say Tehran's nuclear program is still peaceful and that higher enrichment levels are a defensive response to US hostility. Iran says the US pulled out of the 2015 deal first in 2018, and Europe failed to deliver promised economic benefits. So Iran argues Europe has no moral or legal right to punish it now. Now, if sanctions return, Iran has warned of consequences, possibly quitting the non-proliferation treaty altogether, ending cooperation with the IAEA, and even taking more aggressive steps in the region. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has rejected direct talks with Washington, saying Iran will never bow. But Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has hinted at possible indirect talks if guarantees are given against future military strikes.
At
this stage, our focus is on preventing actions or incidents that may be costly for the country. We are negotiating with all our might in this regard.
So, is there a way out? There is still a narrow diplomatic window. If Snapback is triggered, there is a 30-day period in which the Security Council could suspend it, but that would require a new resolution. The E3 or the US would almost certainly veto any such move. Meanwhile, Russia and China are proposing a 6-month extension to delay Snapback and allow more time for diplomacy. But Europe sees this as a stalling tactic and not as a solution. The calendar is important here too. The United Nations General Assembly meets in late September, bringing leaders together. And that could be the last chance for serious diplomacy before sanctions hit. So the stakes are incredibly high. Iran's economy, the credibility of the UN system, and the risk of a wider West Asia conflict. The world is watching to see whether this crisis ends in diplomacy or triggers another escalation. Before we wrap up, here's something a little lighter to end on. In Western Indonesia, the centuries-old Pacu Jalur boat race has made a big splash this year, thanks to an 11-year-old boy whose viral dance moves have brought global attention and record crowds to this traditional river festival. Thanks for watching. We leave you with these joyful scenes.